Los Angeles of the 1920s was a strange blend of dust, orange groves, and insatiable ambition. The sun here shone differently, as if promising that on this very land a new world could be built, free from the prejudices of old Europe and the puritanical rigidity of the East Coast. On one hot day in 1923, a group of men in strict black suits gathered at a construction site that would soon become a legendary studio. Despite the scorching heat, they did not remove their jackets. On their hands were white gloves, and over their clothes, strange, gold and silver embroidered lambskin aprons. In their hands, they held not scripts or financial estimates, but a plumb line, a level, and a square. This was not merely the laying of a new pavilion's foundation, it was a sacred ritual of consecrating the cornerstone, performed according to ancient canons dating back to the time of King Solomon's temple construction. The men standing in the circle were not just businessmen or architects. They were Jack Warner, Louis B. Mayer, and Harry Warner, titans whose names would soon shine brighter than any stars in the cinematic firmament. But at that moment, they were lodge brothers, united by one great purpose. They believed that cinema was not a fairground amusement, but a powerful tool of enlightenment, a new language capable of rewriting human history and implanting, in their view, the correct values into the mass consciousness. Hollywood is not called the Dream Factory for nothing. This term conceals a much deeper, almost alchemical meaning, a factory for the production of reality. And at the origins of this factory stood those who called themselves Freemasons. To understand how a secret brotherhood could become so deeply rooted in the entertainment industry, one must look at the spirit of the time itself. The early 20th century was an era of searching for new meanings. Traditional religions were losing their influence, and the resulting vacuum was rapidly filled with new ideas. Freemasonry, with its emphasis on self-improvement, fraternal support, and universal truths, became an ideal refuge for people who were building their lives from scratch. Most of the founders of Hollywood studios were immigrants. They had fled poverty and oppression, and for them, the lodge became not just a club of interest, but a social elevator, a guarantee of security, and a sign of belonging to the elite. Entering the temple, they ceased to be strangers with unpronounceable surnames. They became equals among equals. The studio system they created remarkably mirrored the hierarchical structure of the Masonic order. A studio was a closed world with its own strict rules, stages of initiation, and collective responsibility. At the very top was the Grand Master, the head of the studio, whose word was law. Below them were producers and directors, officers managing the process. And at the base of the pyramid toiled apprentices, actors, screenwriters, and technical staff, dreaming of one day rising higher. This structure was not accidental. Louis B. Mayer, head of MGM, openly stated that the studio should be one big family, where the father is strict but fair. This paternalistic model, borrowed from the lodge, allowed them to control thousands of people and create a product of exceptional quality and ideological purity. The Brotherhood's influence was not limited to organizational structure. It permeated the very fabric of the city. If you walk along Hollywood Boulevard, you will see a majestic building towering over the hustle and bustle of tourists. This is the Hollywood Masonic Temple, built in 1921. A grandiose neoclassical structure with columns and heavy oak doors, it stood directly opposite Grauman's famous Chinese theater. This proximity is deeply symbolic. On one side of the street, a temple of illusions, a cinema where dreams were shown. On the other, a temple of truth, where the secrets of the masters were kept. And often the same people crossed the street to exchange a premier tuxedo for a lodge lapel pin. It was within these walls, hidden from prying eyes, that the fates of many films and careers were decided. Here, in silence and semi-darkness, box office receipts were not discussed, but rather what ideas the next big film should convey. Here, Clark Gable, king of Hollywood and a devoted Mason, could sit next to a simple gaffer, if the latter was higher in degree of initiation. This created a unique atmosphere of trust and unity that was inaccessible to the outside world. The Brotherhood gave its members a sense of chosenness, a feeling that they were not just making movies but fulfilling a great mission of the great architect of the universe, creating new worlds on celluloid film. However, beneath the visible glitter and success lay a complex tangle of contradictions. The outer layer of this influence was obvious and tangible. It manifested in architecture, in public ceremonies, and in the biographies of great people. Harry Houdini, the greatest illusionist and film actor, was a Mason, and even received a star on the Walk of Fame precisely for his contributions to the film industry. Oliver Hardy, half of the famous comedy duo, was a member of Lodge Solomon No. 20. These people did not hide their affiliation with the order, they were proud of it. Their rings with the compass and square often appeared in newsreels and sometimes in the films themselves, as if winking to those in the know. But if we dig deeper, to the level of internal conflict, we see a completely different picture. Being a Freemason in Hollywood meant living a double life. On the one hand, an actor or director had to be a public figure, open, scandalous, flamboyant. On the other hand, he was bound by an oath of silence and the obligation to lead a virtuous life. This internal dissonance often led to personal dramas. John Wayne, an icon of the American Western, joined the lodge already in his mature years, and for him, it became a way to find support in a world that was rapidly changing and losing, as he saw it, its moral compass. For Wayne, the Masonic principles of patriotism, honor, and courage were not empty words. He tried to convey them through his characters, but Hollywood demanded compromises, and he often had to play roles that went against the high ideals of the Brotherhood. This conflict was especially vividly manifested in the fate of the legendary director Cecil B. DeMille. The creator of the most monumental epic canvases in film history, such as The Ten Commandments. DeMille was a deeply religious man and an active Freemason. For him, cinema was a sermon. He used the screen to convey biblical truths to millions of viewers, filtered through the prism of Masonic philosophy. His films were saturated with symbolism, light breaking through darkness, the construction of temples, the search for the lost word. But the industry demanded spectacles, scandals, and the golden calf. DeMille had to balance between the desire to enlighten and the need to entertain, between serving the truth and serving the box office. An even deeper ideological layer of this confrontation lay in the plane of the philosophy of the image. Freemasonry traditionally operates with symbols. For the initiate, a symbol is a key to understanding the universe. Cinema, by its nature, is also the art of symbols. A director, like a Masonic master, builds the composition of a shot, works with light and shadow to convey a certain idea. The question arises, who actually controls the process? The artist who creates by inspiration, or the initiate who consciously embeds hidden codes in the work? Film theorists often note that many classic Hollywood films are structured like a Masonic ritual. The hero goes through trials, initiation, dies a symbolic death, crisis, and is reborn in a new quality, enlightenment. This is a universal mythological plot, but in the hands of Masonic directors, it acquired specific features. Take, for example, the work of John Huston. His film, The Man Who Would Be King, based on the story by Rudyard Kipling, also a known Freemason, is perhaps the most explicit statement on this subject. The film directly speaks of brotherhood, demonstrates Masonic symbols, and discusses the philosophy of power. Huston, being a Freemason, did not just adapt a book. He created a cinematic treatise on the nature of power and pride, on what happens when a person tries to appropriate the divine right to build worlds. But a genuine transformation in the relationship between Hollywood and the Brotherhood occurred after World War II. The world changed. Old ideals collapsed. The Golden Age was replaced by the cynicism of film noir, and then the rebellion of the 60s. The old guard of studio bosses began to depart. Power shifted to corporations, for whom rituals and oaths were a relic of the past. However, Masonic influence did not disappear, it changed. If before it was structural and administrative, now it became purely symbolic and intellectual. New directors emerged who perhaps did not attend lodge meetings with the same regularity as their predecessors, but were deeply immersed in esoteric symbolism. Stanley Kubrick became a key figure in this new stage. His relationship with secret societies is a subject of endless debate and research. Was he a Freemason? There are no publicly available official documents confirming his membership in any specific lodge, which is not surprising for a person of his level of secrecy. However, his films speak for themselves. Kubrick was obsessed with details. He left nothing to chance. Every frame in his films is meticulously crafted with mathematical precision. Every prop has significance. In the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, we see a classic Masonic allegory of the evolution of consciousness. The black monolith is the perfect hewn stone, a symbol of perfect knowledge given to humanity from without, pushing it to a new stage of development. Astronaut Bowman's journey through the Stargate and his transformation into the Star Child is, in essence, a visualization of the highest degree of initiation, a transition to the level of a superhuman. Kubrick uses a language of symbols, understandable to the initiated, to tell a story about the search for God, who turns out not to be a bearded old man on a cloud, but a higher intelligence, pure energy. But a turning point comes in the late 90s. Kubrick shoots his last, most enigmatic film, Eyes Wide Shut. This film became a kind of watershed, a moment when the secret became manifest, yet even more incomprehensible. The film's plot revolves around a secret society performing rituals in a luxurious mansion. Many researchers saw in this a direct reference to the real practices of elite lodges. The ritual scene is depicted with terrifying authenticity. Masks, robes, chanting, a circular formation. Kubrick, as if, pulled back the curtain, showing the underside of the world of elites, where power, pleasure, and mystery are intertwined in a tight knot. The paradox is that by showing the ritual, Kubrick desacralized it. He showed not wise elders caring for the good of humanity, but jaded rich people playing dangerous games. It was a challenge to a system that had kept its secrets for centuries. There is a theory that the director paid with his life for this very film. He passed away just a few days after presenting the final cut of the film to the studio. The official version is a heart attack, but conspiracy theorists are still looking for connections between the premiere and his sudden passing. Eyes Wide Shut became his testament, and at the same time, a warning. Knowledge is dangerous, and entering forbidden doors can cost too much. The culmination of this long-standing history of the relationship between Freemasonry and Hollywood does not occur on screen, but in the mind of the viewer. We live in a world where symbols of secret societies have become part of pop culture. The pyramid with the eye, the checkered floor, the columns of Jachin and Boaz. We see all this in music videos, in blockbusters, in clothing design. What was once sacred knowledge, accessible only to the chosen after long years of trials, is now replicated in millions of copies. Does this mean that Masons have lost control? Or, on the contrary, is this the highest form of control? To hide a leaf in a forest. When a symbol becomes ubiquitous, it loses its original meaning. It becomes noise. We stop noticing the eye in the triangle because we've seen it 1,000 times. This is a brilliant camouflage strategy. Hollywood, created by Masons, fulfilled its task. It normalized esotericism, made the magical mundane. Modern blockbusters, such as National Treasure or Dan Brown's adaptations, turn the history of secret societies into an amusement ride. The viewer munches popcorn and follows the adventures of the heroes, without thinking that behind these plots lies a real philosophy that has shaped Western civilization for centuries. But if we pause and look closer, we'll see that the fundamental principles haven't disappeared. The idea that reality can be controlled through images is more relevant today than ever. Only the tools have become more sophisticated. Before, it was silent, black and white films. Now it's complex computer simulations and algorithms shaping our news feeds. The principle of the quote zero has transformed into the principle of the quote one. New generation directors like Christopher Nolan or the Wachowskis continue to explore themes of the illusory nature of the world, the multi-layeredness of reality, and the search for truth. In quote 2 or quote 3, we see all the same Gnostic and Masonic motifs: awakening from a dream, breaking free from an imposed system, searching for the architect. This theme takes on particular resonance today as the boundaries between truth and fiction are definitively blurred. We live in an era of post-truth, where the image on the screen is more important than the fact. The lessons we can learn from the history of Masonic Hollywood concern our own information hygiene. We must understand that any media product is not just entertainment. It's a message. It's a construct created by someone with a specific purpose. Old-school Masons believed in the power of symbols to elevate the soul, to lead a person to light. The modern industry often uses the same mechanisms to capture attention and manipulate emotions. It's important to realize that conspiracy is too simple a word. Reality is more complex. There is no dark room where 12 elders write the script of our lives. There is a system of ideas. There is a cultural code that was laid at the foundation of the industry 100 years ago and continues to operate autonomously. Masonic values, the pursuit of order, hierarchy, belief in progress and reason, have become the DNA of Hollywood. They are dissolved in every heroic epic, in every drama about overcoming oneself. And when we empathize with a hero who single-handedly confronts chaos and restores justice, we, unknowingly, share these values. Returning to the beginning of our narrative, to that hot day and the people in aprons laying the first stone of the studio, we can see the cyclical nature of history. The stone they laid in the foundation has not disappeared. It has simply grown layers of new technologies, special effects, and marketing strategies. The building has been completed and has turned into a skyscraper, its peak lost in the clouds. Those who laid the foundation have long left this world, but their design lives on. Cinema remains a temple where millions of people come. The screen is the altar. The projector's light is the divine light of knowledge. and the auditorium is the lodge where all of us, sitting in the dark, experience a collective initiation. The only difference is that the first Hollywood Masons knew what they were building and why. We, modern viewers, often consume the fruits of their labors without understanding the taste of the filling. Perhaps it's time to open our eyes a little wider, not to look for secret signs in every frame for conspiratorial excitement, but to learn to read the language of cinema as its creators intended it, as a language of meanings, ideas, and philosophy. After all, the best defense against manipulation is understanding how the trick works. And then, perhaps, the dream factory will cease to be a tool of control and become what it was originally intended to be, a tool for self-knowledge and understanding the world. The history of Masons in Hollywood is not a story of sinister control. It is a story of the power of human thought, of the desire to order chaos and leave a mark on eternity. And every time the lights go out and a studio logo appears on the screen, be it the Warner Brothers shield, the Paramount Mountain, or the MGM lion, we unwittingly participate in a ritual that began 100 years ago and will continue as long as humanity needs stories to understand who we truly are. The depth of this influence can also be traced in how the perception of the actor itself changed. In early Hollywood, the star system was artificially created, resembling the process of alchemical transmutation. An ordinary person was taken off the street. Their name, biography, and appearance were changed, and they were taught to move and speak. From the lead of everyday life, the gold of an idol was smelted. This process was strictly and uncompromisingly controlled by the studios. The actors signed a contract that effectively deprived them of free will, but in return gave them the status of a demigod. Does this not resemble a path of initiation, where a neophyte must die to worldly life to be reborn in a new capacity? Louis Mayer personally monitored the moral character of his charges, acting like a strict lodge master, punishing for transgressions and rewarding for obedience. It is also interesting to trace the evolution of genres. The Western, the main genre of American cinema in the mid-20th century, was permeated with the Masonic spirit of frontier development. The cowboy is a wandering knight, a Freemason of the wild prairies who brings law and order, the compass and square, to a world of chaos and lawlessness. He builds a home, protects the weak, and establishes fair boundaries. This is a civilizing mission translated into the language of adventure cinema. John Ford, another titan of directing and a Mason, in his films created a mythology of America where the lodge often served as the center of social life in a small town. In his films, one can observe how, in times of crisis, men gather together to make a decision, and this gathering bears all the hallmarks of a Masonic circle. With the advent of sound, and then color, the possibilities of influencing the viewer expanded. Walt Disney, whose connection to the Masonic youth organization de Molay, named after the last Templar Grand Master Jacques de Molay, is widely known, created an entire universe based on the principles of educating the ideal citizen. Mickey Mouse clubs, Disneyland parks, these are models of an ideal society, a utopia where harmony, purity, and order reign. Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow, was Disney's swan song, his attempt to embody the dream of a technocratic paradise built on the principles of reason and enlightenment. Disney believed that through entertainment, a child's character could be shaped, instilling in them the correct moral guidelines. And in this, he was a faithful follower of Masonic pedagogy. However, the 60s brought a rupture. The counterculture rejected the paternalism of old Hollywood. A new generation of directors, Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg, grew up in a different system of coordinates. Although there is less direct evidence of their membership in lodges, they inherited the tools created by their predecessors. They learned to use myth and archetype with even greater virtuosity. George Lucas, in Star Wars, literally adapted Joseph Campbell's quote to, creating a new religion for a secular world. The Jedi, with their hierarchy, council of masters, training of Padawans, and struggle against the dark side. This is perhaps the most vivid embodiment of a knightly monastic order, the prototype of Freemasonry, in popular culture. Lucas showed that the structure of brotherhood and the path of initiation remain attractive to the viewer, even when dressed in cosmic scenery. The philosophical conflict embedded in the foundation of cinema continues to develop today. This is a conflict between elite knowledge and mass consumption. The founding Masons believed in enlightening the masses, but at the same time maintained a distance. Today's Hollywood, seemingly utterly democratic, but the distance has not disappeared. It has become technological. We see the product, but we do not see the mechanisms of its creation. We do not know how the algorithms that recommend films to us work. We do not know what meanings are embedded in the subtext of the script at the stage of its approval by focus groups. And in this sense, we still remain profanes, standing at the gates of the temple, contemplating beautiful stained glass windows, but not admitted into the Holy of Holies. Looking at modern blockbusters, one can notice another curious trend: the theme of the Chosen One. Neo in The Matrix, Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, all of them undergo a path of initiation. They learn that the world is not what it seems, acquire mentors, receive secret knowledge and tools of power. This scheme is eternal because it resonates with the deep desire of every person to touch a mystery, to become part of something greater. Hollywood exploits this craving, selling us a 2-hour ticket to the lodge. We pay to feel involved in saving the world, in the great battle of good and evil. But there is also a flip side to the coin. Critics and conspiracy theorists argue that this is not enlightenment, but programming. That through the repetition of the same plots and symbols, we are accustomed to certain patterns of behavior, to the idea of the inevitability of hierarchy and the necessity of submission to wise leaders. That the idea of a new world order, attributed to Masons, is realized precisely through the unification of culture. When a teenager in Tokyo, Moscow, and New York watches the same film and idolizes the same heroes, their mental codes are synchronized. Global Hollywood becomes an instrument for creating global humanity. And in this context, the question of whether specific directors are members of a lodge becomes secondary. What is important is that the machine itself operates according to blueprints created 100 years ago by men in aprons. An example of such global synchronization can be found in the phenomenon of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Dozens of films linked into a single network, a complex chronology, intertwining fates. This is a grandiose structure comparable to medieval cathedrals. Kevin Feige, the architect of this universe, acts as a grand master, holding a master plan in his head for years to come. Viewers follow the plot for years, searching for Easter eggs and hidden hints, much like mystics search for signs in sacred texts. This is a new form of religiosity, where instead of saints, there are superheroes, and instead of liturgy, there is the premiere of a new phase. However, should we fear this influence? Masonic philosophy is fundamentally humanistic. It proclaims freedom of conscience, equality, and brotherhood. If these ideas, even in a simplified form, are broadcast through the screen, then perhaps there is nothing wrong with that. The problem arises when form begins to dominate content. when a symbol is used not to awaken the mind, but to lull it to sleep. Kubrick, in Eyes Wide Shut, warned precisely about this, about a world where ritual becomes an empty form, concealing emptiness or vice. It is also important to note the role of sound and music in this process. Music in cinema works directly with the subconscious, bypassing the critical filters of the mind. Many great Hollywood composers also had connections to Freemasonry or esoteric circles. The use of certain harmonies, rhythms, and frequencies can induce a trance state in the viewer, increasing suggestibility. This ancient technique, used in temple mysteries, now serves to enhance the dramatic effect in the cinema hall. When we cry or laugh at the movies, we are reacting not only to the plot, but also to carefully calibrated psychoacoustic influence. Drawing a line under this multi-layered research, we must admit, Hollywood and Freemasonry are inseparable, like light and shadow. They grew from the same root, from man's desire to create and rethink reality. The founders of the studios laid the foundations of the industry with principles that allowed it to survive and become a global force. These principles, structure, hierarchy, symbolism, universality, are still at work today. But, like any powerful tool, cinema can be both medicine and poison. It all depends on who holds the camera and who sits in the director's chair. Today, when we look at a smartphone screen or a huge plasma, we see reflections of the light ignited by the Warner Brothers and Mayer. We live in a house they built. And, perhaps, the most important thing we can do is to be conscious viewers. Not just consumers of content, but explorers capable of seeing hidden meanings behind beautiful images, recognizing manipulations, and appreciating true art. After all, ultimately, the main temple is built not of stone and not of film, but in the heart and mind of each person. And no one can control this temple but ourselves. The story continues. Each new generation of filmmakers takes up, metaphorically speaking, a hammer and chisel to carve their images from the block of time. Whether they will be Freemasons or just hired workers of the industry, time will tell. But the cornerstone, laid a century ago, lies firmly, bearing the colossal weight of our collective dreams and fears. And as long as cinema exists, there will always be an element of mystery, magic, and ritual in it, transforming a simple screening into a journey to other worlds. And in this journey, as in life, the main thing is to keep your eyes wide open, even if the film's title suggests otherwise.